I have a very exciting shir, I think, today. I'm going to find it exciting anyway. It ties very much in with the parsha this week. From next week, I would like to give a series of 2 shiurim, next week and the week after, on the Ethiopian Beit OUisrael community in the run-up to Sigd, which is at the end of November. It's a fascinating community, lots of very interesting integrations of their own traditions with the halachic system when they came to Eretz Israel. It really is something worth studying, and I'd like to spend 2 sessions on that. In December, the first 2 Wednesdays in December, I will not be in Eretz Israel. I will, Be'ezrat Hashem, be in America. I will be in Boston and New York, New England, New Jersey, and then back in the middle of December. So I'm missing 2 sessions. I will obviously let the OU know, and they will be able to arrange, I'm sure, an amazing share for you. If I could remind you to turn off your phones, please, now when you get the chance, and then we can make a start. So this week, I hope everybody has the right sheets in front of them. There is one source that I added since I sent it in, which I will give you Baal Peh in the middle, which is a source which I think you'll really appreciate. But I would like to talk today, and it's going to be a rapid-fire shir. It's going to be a roller coaster through Tanakh. We're going to be looking at Nevi'im, Ksuvim, and Chumash in all sorts of different areas. And I'd like to look again in the sort of broad tradition of this shir, halachic and hashkafic. I'd like to look at a halachic analysis of Hachnasat Orchim, a mitzvah that everybody in this room, I'm sure, has done and continues to do and hopes to do in the future, of inviting guests and welcoming guests. And I'd like to look at some of the hashkafic underpinnings of how we connect that with Avraham Avinu for this week's parsha. Because I'm sure if you stop Jews in the street and say to them, where does it say in the Torah, or maybe before that, is there a mitzvah in Jewish thought to invite guests? 1,000 out of 1,000 Jews will say yes. But if you ask them, where is the mitzvah in the Chumash? Where does it say, and thou shalt invite guests to thy home? Okay, they'll start talking about Avraham Avinu, almost certainly. And you'll say to them, well, one second, you can't learn mitzvot, obligatory mitzvot in the Torah before Matan Torah. The Rambam is very big on that, and not everyone agrees in exactly the same way, but the idea that before Matan Torah, the Jews were proto-Jews. They were not fully Jewish in the way that you and I are Jewish and are obligated in mitzvot. So where does it say in the Torah you have to invite guests? So this is where I want to start with number 1, which is the beginning of the halachic analysis. The Rambam says in Hilchot Evel, now Hilchot Evel obviously deals with Avelut and mourning, which is obviously a lot of mitzvot of chesed go into situations of mourning, of shiva, visiting and going to El Hesped, etc. Look at what the Rambam says. Mitzvat ashe shel divreihem. It is a positive rabbinic. Divreihem means their words, rabbinic commandments. Levakeh cholim, and now he lists off all the things that you and I call chesed. Levakeh cholim, to visit the sick. Lenachem avelim, go to a shiva. Lahotzia meis, to bring out the dead for burial. Hachnasat kala, to bring in the kala to a wedding. Lelavois ha'orchim, to escort your guests. We'll talk about why it's called livui orchim, as opposed to lahachnis orchim. The halacha follows more about how you show them out than how you bring them in. We'll talk about that. To do everything that needs to be done for a burial, to carry out the dead on one's shoulders, to walk in the levaya, lisboy, to give the hesped, lachpor, to dig out the grave, likpor, to cover it in, to give simcha to kala v'chatan. It's interesting, colloquially, you and I tend to talk about simchas chosen v'kala. The Rambam very carefully doesn't say that. He said simchat kala v'chatan, because the focus on the simcha is always on the kala. The chatan is probably clueless, has no idea really what he's doing, what he's getting into, what could go right, what could go wrong. He's just drinking whiskey and dancing. She's the one that's thinking, oy vey, what happens if this is the biggest mistake I ever made? And therefore, simcha kala v'chosen. Hopefully she's not just thinking this. To give them the wedding presents they need to set up a home. Now, here's the key. This is chesed you do with yourself physically, as opposed to your money. He's going to get to that later. Sometimes you can write a check and that's fine. Sometimes writing a check is totally inappropriate. Send it to a shiva. I couldn't come to your shiva, but I've sent you $20, wishing you bracha. You know, obviously. So this is all things you do with your body. She'ein lehem shi'ur, and there's no limit. We'll see there is a limit, but that's not really the focus on my shir today. The afal pisha kol mitzvahs elu midivrehim, and even though these are all rabbinic mitzvot, like I've said, these are positive obligations that the rabbis enforced. Hariheim bichlal v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. We've talked about this in other shirim at length. These are all in the klal, in the general umbrella mitzvah v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. And you'll know if you studied that mitzvah, Rabbi Akiva famously says about v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, zeh klal gadol b'torah. This is not a specific mitzvah only. V'ahavta l'recha kamocha is a klal. And therefore the rabbi said, in order to get you to provide a structure to help you to keep this mitzvah of v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, we're going to specify all these areas of chesed. Kol hadvarim she'ata rotzeh she'yasu otam lecha acherim. Anything that you want other people to do for you, aseh ata osem la'achicha b'torah u'b'mitzvahs. You should do for other Jews. I'm not getting into exactly b'torah u'b'mitzvahs, what our obligations towards non-observant, non-practicing. That's not for today. But the rubric and the structure here is fascinating. According to the Torah, v'ahavta l'recha kamocha is essentially a negative mitzvah. Remember the Gemara with Hillel, where the ger comes to the Hillel and says, I want you to convert me, to teach me the Torah while I'm standing on one leg. And what does he say to him? Everything you don't want, kol da'ansani l'chavrech lo ta'aved. What you don't like, don't do to other people. And the Meforshim pick up on that. And they say, yes, because on a Torah level, the mitzvah of v'ahavta l'recha kamocha is a negative mitzvah. It comes in a posuk of negative mitzvahs. Lo sitor v'lo sikon v'lo sitor, etc. And the answer, the Marashal says this, is on a Torah level, your only obligation is not to be insensitive, not to be rude, not to do things to other people that you don't like it when they do to you. But on a positive level, the Torah says, we're going to leave it up to you to decide what proactive chesed to do. It's up to you. There's no specific obligation. Do whatever you like. The Rabbanon come along, the rabbis come along, says the Rambam, and says, look, that's very optimistic. Tell people to do whatever they like. But the answer is they probably won't know what to do, or they won't get around to doing it, or they'll be lazy and they'll sit at home. So we are going to give people, say the rabbis, a framework of positive, proactive mitzvahs. We're going to flip it back positively. Look how he said at the end. He flipped Hillel from negative back to positive. Anything you do want people to do for you, go out and do for other people. These are all rabbinic obligations which get you the Torah mitzvah. On a technical level, you'll say the rabbinic mitzvah is a mitzvah chiyuvit, an obligatory mitzvah, whereas the Torah mitzvah is kiyumit, you fulfilled it. But the rabbis gave you the structure to do that. And that's one of the themes in all rabbinic mitzvahs. The Torah is very optimistic, the rabbis are often very realistic. The Torah says, yeah, we think he'll work it out, and the rabbis say, no, we're going to give you a structure. The Torah says, pray. Anywhere, anytime, any words, whatever you want. And the rabbis say, you know what? Shachris, Mincha, Mariv, Shmona, Esrei, Kaddish, Minyan, give you structure. Yeah.
So is this about action or about thought?
It's about action. It's about action. The Rambam says, but we're not really focusing so much on that mitzvah today. But that's the roots of Hachnasat Orchim. So now if anyone asks you, where does it say in the Torah you must invite guests? The answer is, all the chesed mitzvahs fall under that rubric. Hachnasat Orchim, however, has a special place. The Rambam goes on in the next halacha, number 2, to say the following. Schar halevaya merubah min hakol. The schar for escorting guests out is greater than anything else. Now he brings in Avram. These are the rules, if you like, that Avram has laid down to us. V'derech hachesed shenahag, and the chesed that he initiated with us. Ma'achel oivrei derachim. He gives food to people who are wayfarers. U'mashke oisam. He gives them drink. Malave oisam. He accompanies them. U'gedoy lahachnasas orchim mihakbalat pnei shchina. Here's the famous line quoting from the Gemara. Hachnasas orchim is even greater than receiving the shchina, than a communion, a direct connection with God. We'll see those psukim right now. He sees these 3 people. And helping them out and escorting them on their way is even better than bringing them in. And the rabbi said, anyone who doesn't escort their guests out properly, it's tantamount to murdering them. And we'll talk about what scenario that is, and we can see, some aspects of that today as well. We'll talk about that as we go through. So what are these psukim he's talking about? Famous psukim from the beginning of this week's parsha coming up. Number 3. So Avram Avinu at the end of Lech Lecha has had a Brit Milah. We remember that. So assuming that this is shortly thereafter, that's how Chazal understood it. Vayera elav Hashem be'eloni Mamre. God appears to him in the trees of Mamre. Okay? V'hu yoshev pesach ha'ohel. He's sitting in the entrance to his tent kachom hayom, in the heat of the day. Now, what's unusual about this on a pshat level is God appears to him but doesn't say anything. Whenever God appears, there's a message, there's some communication, some prophecy. Here God just appears. Now Rashi, you'll be familiar with, says, well, yes, that's because he's just had Lech Lecha. He links the end of the Parsha before with the beginning of this Parsha, and it's Bikur Cholim. That's what he's doing. That's why he doesn't need to say anything. To teach you that when you do Bikur Cholim, what you need to do is just go. You don't need to say anything. And sometimes, by the way, that's a lifesaver, because what can you say? Sometimes there's what to say, and sometimes there's nothing you can say without sounding ridiculous. When you're visiting a person who's very sick, you just have to be there. Don't say anything. That's how Rashi is learning it, but the Rambam's learning it differently, we'll see. Vayisa einav, he lifts up his eyes, number 3 in the first line. Vayar, and he sees, V'hine shlosha anashim letzavim alav, there are 3 men standing by him. Vayar, and now he sees the second time, because the second see is, I see. Not just I see with my eyes, but I see what I need to do. Vayaretz likrasam, and now everything goes into a fast motion, forward motion, and he runs towards them. Mipetach ha'oel, from the tent. V'yishtachu, and he bends down. Not bad for a man of 100 years old who's just had a bris milah. Vayomer Hashem, or is it Hashem? Let's read the pasuk as it is. Vayomer Adonai, imna matzati chen be'enecha al na tavor me'lavdecha. Who is he addressing? That's the key. Very famous question. Is it God, who's just appeared to him, or is it the leader of the Malachim, or the men as he sees them at that point who have come to visit him? He says, if you really like me, please don't walk past my tent. And now everything goes into overdrive. Yukach namat maim, let's get some water. We'll wash off your feet. Relax under the tree. I'll get some bread. And have a good meal. And then you can go after that. Because that's why you're coming past my tent, so that you can sit with me and eat with me. And they said, it's okay, fine, we'll do what you said. V'yimaher Avraham, and he rushes to the tent. El Sarah to Sarah, v'yomer, and he says to her, Mahari, rush. What's all the rush? Everyone's rushing. Shaloi seim kemach soles lushi. Get 3 seir of flowers and make some cakes. 3 seir of flour is enormous. It's like a banquet of cake and bread. V'asi ugais, make some bread, make cakes, make matzahs, whatever. There's a whole connection with Pesach and ugais matzah. I'm not getting into that now. Ve'ela bakar rats, and he aratz Avraham, and Avraham runs now to the cattle shed. Ve'yikach ben bakar rach v'tav, he takes a tender calf that they can make for a meal. Ve'yiten el hanar, he gives it to the young lad. Who is the young lad? Yishmael, obviously not Yitzchak, he's not been born. V'yimaher, and he's also rushing now, la'asot, he rushes to prepare the calf. V'yikach chem'a, and then Avram takes some butter, v'chalav, and some milk, uben bakar, and the cow. And yes, we could have a whole shir on meat and milk and what's going on there. We talked about that when we talked about shvuas and milchiks, not for now. Lots of answers to that. Asher asa, which he had made, vayitzin lifneihem, v'hu omed aleihem, he stands over them, tachat eight, under the tree, vayochelu, while they eat. Vayomru elav, and they said to him, Ayei Sarah ishtecha, where is Sarah your wife? Vayomeh hinei ba'ohel, he says she's in the tent, and then they seem to lose all interest of talking to her because they don't actually address her at all. They just seem to want to know where she is. These are very famous lines. I'm sure you've looked at them at depth yourselves, but we are going to pull all these apart and pull lots of fascinating information out of them as we learn the mitzvah of Hachnasat Orchim. Before we start with some of the details, maybe one midrash that is less well known. Not even number 4, midrash in Gadatze in the Gemara. V'chein, Tanu Rabbi Yishmael. So in Rabbi Yishmael's yeshiva they taught, B'scha shloisha zachal shloisha. For 3 great things that Avraham did, he laid, if you like, the infrastructure for 3 wonderful miracles that we received later. Bischar, in the reward for chem'a v'chalav, the butter and the milk and the beautiful sweet dishes and the choice foods that he made, zachol leman. That's why we got the man in the desert. Bischar v'hu omed aleihem, because Avram stood over them as a waiter and helped them and looked after them. Zachul la'amud ha'anan. That's why we got the cloud that looked after us in the desert. Ubischar yukach nama'at ma'im, and in the reward for let's get a little bit of water to wash off your feet. Zachul le'be'er shel Miriam. We got the be'er of Miriam. It's a very beautiful midrash. We are used to thinking of the man and the clouds and the be'er as Moshe Aharon and Miriam, and you can certainly do that as well. But here it's saying all three of them are connected with Abraham, and I think that's a very important idea here, which is Abraham didn't realize when he was doing these small acts of chesed what impact that would have on his future generations. And I find this in life as I get a little bit older. I'm not old yet, but I'm getting there. Please God. You realize later in life the things that you didn't even realize were impactful. Small little details. Someone comes later and says, I don't know if you remember, but you said this or you did this and it's massively impacted my life. Trouble is that can happen negatively as well. You never realize sometimes, but it can happen very positively. I heard a story a couple of days ago about a yeshiva. I'm not going to get into which one. The little guy came in, a young guy, and a bit of a nebach, whatever. But they looked after him very nicely. They had no particular interest in looking after him, except just they were nice people. They brought him in and they treated him well. A few years later, he comes back. I don't know if you remember me, but you looked after me nicely. Here's a check for $6 million. He gave him $6 million. They didn't even remember who he was. He said, I went off and I made a load of money, and I remember how you treated me. So this is the $6 million payoff that the Jewish people got for these small acts of chesed, and Hachnasat Orchim is an unbelievable opportunity to do that. Okay, the Rambam who said this is bigger even than receiving the Shechina, where's he coming from? Gemara in Shavuos, number 5. Kol Shemus Amurim b'Torah. All the times it writes the name of God in the Torah, Abraham, in the story of Abraham, Kodesh. Meaning the scribe who's writing a Sefer Torah, when he gets to Adonai, the word Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yaled, Yud, as in here, he needs to know, is that just my Lord? It's not a Shem Kodesh, it's just my Lord, which is a Shem Chol, he has a different kavanah. Or is it Shem Hashem, Shem Adnut of Hashem? So it says here in Halacha, or all of the names of Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud are all Kodesh. Chutz mizeh, apart from this one that I just mentioned. Shehu Chol, but that's Chol. Shelemah v'yomeh Adonai, imna matzati chem b'einecha. He's not talking to God at all. He's talking on a pshat level to the men. He's saying, my lords, please, come in. Chanina ben Achi Rabbi Yeshua, the Chanina, the nephew of Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, Mishum Rabbi Elazar Hamodai. This pair said in the name of Elazar Hamodai, no, Afzeh Kodesh. This is also a Shem Kodesh. Kaman Azlaha Da'amar Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. Who is that going like? This following statement, Gedola Hachnasat Orchim Yosem Hakbalish Pnei Shechina, that receiving guests is even greater than receiving the Shechina, receiving God's presence. Kaman, who's it going like? Ka'oisazuk. Like this pair that we just read, this pair that said, even this Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud is Shem Kodesh. So who is Abraham talking to? He's talking to God. He's talking to Hashem. He's saying to Hashem, this is an unbelievable opportunity for me. I'm in a personal, communion with God. What could be greater than that? And then these three dusty travelers come along and he says to God, actually, I'm going to put you on hold, if you don't mind. Just pause. Please don't pass by. Please don't leave me. I'll be back when I can. I've just got to deal with these three travelers. That's an unbelievable statement. And it's a bit of a chutzpah. Now, you and I are privileged to actually have read Sefer Bereshis, so we know, oh yes, of course, because Gedola Hakbalash Hachnasat Orchim Hakbalash Pnei Shechina. But how did he know? We're going to get to that at the end. Where did he get that from? Yeah, but he doesn't know they're angels. These are three dusty travelers coming by his tent when he's in pain and old. Who needs the hassle? He doesn't know they're angels. He doesn't know anything about them. And yet he does this very gutsy move. The Rambam, over the page to page 2, the Rambam paskins like this. Kol hashemes ha'amurim be'Avram Kodesh. Says when a scribe is writing a Torah, all the names Shem Adnus are all Kodesh. Af zeh, including even this Shneimah Hashem Imnama Sasichein, etc. Hari Hu Kodesh. And it's based on a Gemara. Look at the Gemara number 7. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Gedola Hachnasat Orchim Me'akbalash Pnei Shechina. That receiving guests is even greater than receiving the Shechina Shleiman. He brings the pasuk here to Siv. Rashi says, he leaves God, v'halach lekabel ha'orchim, and he goes to receive guests. Amar Rebbe Elazar bar Rev. So Rebbe says, come and look. Working with God is not like working with regular people. You can't say to the president, to a senior boss, to whoever it is, you just wait. I'll be back when I can. You can't say that. V'ilu ba'Kodesh Baruch Hu, but with Hashem, you can. Siv, it says, Vayomei Hashem, etc., etc. So I heard from Rav Berkowitz, from Rav Yitzchak Berkowitz many years ago, that the underlying idea here is very profound, which is that Avraham Avinu is trying to have this connection with Hashem. And it's very difficult because God is intangible. You can't have that kind of really sensory relationship in any way with God. A lot of it's happening in your mind, reaching out and hoping that there's something coming back. But when he gets a chance to deal with people, each of which is a Tselem Elokim, each person has that Tselem Elokim inside them, they have that spark of divinity, so I can connect with God, says Abraham, much better by connecting with these people who are at Tselem Elokim, and I'm not really breaking off from you. I'm doing what I'm trying to do with you, but even better. Because with people you can give them a smile, you can give them some challenge, you can connect with them, and there's so much more going on there in terms of your God connection, and therefore your Bein Adam L'Chavero is actually an even better way of doing Bein Adam L'Makom, which is very important. And that's probably why Hillel says to the Ger, remember, what does he say to him? What I want to summarize Judaism as is being a good person. If you reach out to other people and you do things for others, don't treat them the way you wouldn't want to be treated. That kol HaTorah kula. All the God stuff is perush, he says. It's important. You've got to read the small print. But if you're not a nice person, you cannot be a religious person. You cannot. You can act the act. You can walk the walk. You can talk the talk. But you can't be the real deal.
If Adonai is referring to the Malachim, everything after that in the pasuk is singular, and that's plural.
Yeah, that's it. And Rashi talks about that. Is he talking to the leader, or is he talking to them all? A good spot, but you're not the first to spot that question. But it's a good question, okay? And then Rashi talks about it there as well. Okay, fine. Chazal talk in great detail, in great enthusiasm about the mitzvah of Hachnasat Orchim in particular, above all other chesed. Look at number 8. Am Rav Yehuda bar Shilo, Am Rav Asi, Am Rav Yochanan. Shisha dvarim adam oichel periseim bi'olam hazeh, v'keren kar mislol yam haba. There are 6 things where if you do it in this world, you get a reward in this world, or it has good consequence in this world and the next world. And this is not the standard list you read in shul in the morning. This is a different list. The Eloheim, first on the list, Hachnasat Orchim, Bikur Chayim, Iyun Tefillah, etc., etc. But first on that list is Hachnasat Orchim. Says the Meiri on this mitzvah, on this Gemara, number 9, She'ein lecha mitzvah gedola mizo. There is no greater mitzvah than Hachnasat Orchim. That is an amazing statement. Of all the mitzvahs, this is the one. This is the one that is even closer connection with God than the other mitzvot. And I brought you a beautiful Gemara in number 10 in Sanhedrin that goes through Tanakh. It gives you a whistle-stop tour of all the things that come out of giving people something to eat. All the Jewish grandmothers listening to this will realize now that they were right all along. Giving people a little bit of food is the best thing you can do. Number 10, Gedayla Legima. How great is even a little bit of food? Because the effect of not giving them the food distanced 2 whole families from the Jewish people. You can't marry them because they didn't come out in the desert to help you, to give you a shtickle bread, some water to drink. No big deal, just a little bit. Who is this talking about? Ammon and Moab. We'd love to marry them, meaning they're, part of the mishpacha, second cousins through Lot, etc. No, they're off. You can't marry them because they were not machnis orchim. Rabbi Yochanan didei amar. Rabbi Yochanan says, meracheket et hakroivim, like we just said, it distances those who are close. Mekarevet et harechoikim, food and drink brings closer those who are distant. Ma'alemet einayim min harasham, it can hide the eyes away, the punishing eyes away from the wicked. Umasher Shechina al Navi Habali can even bring down real prophecy on false prophets. And making a mistake even by accident can have massive consequences, like something you did on purpose. What are these examples? So food, or not giving the food, can distance those who are close. Ammon and Moab, now we can't marry them. Who does it bring close? Yitro. What did Yitro say? The Amar Rabbi Yochanan Biskar, Kir enlo v'yochel lechem. Meaning Yitro said, the girls say to him, Dad, we saw this Egyptian man, Ish Mitzri. He helps us at the well. And the first thing Yitro says is, bring him in. I mean, he was looking for son-in-laws as well. That's true. But he says, bring him in. Let's give him some food. The first thing he says is, he should eat. That's the first thing he said. And because of that, Zachu b'nei bana v'yashvu b'lishas hagasis. He had descendants who sat on the Sanhedrin, Yisro, because he gave a shtickle bread to Moshe. He didn't even know he was Moshe. How can giving out food protect even the wicked? Micha, Pesel Micha, which this Gemara has just been talking about before, where Micha sets up this alternative Mishkan on the next hill in Shiloh. Why wasn't he just struck down? He was there for hundreds of years. No, because he was hospitable. He brought people in with food. He genuinely wanted to look after them. That gave him this kiyum. It led him to sustain his project, even though it was radically against what the Torah was looking for. I don't know if you know the story, Malachim Aleph chapter 13. Ido Hanavi goes to Yeravam and says to him, you're doing a terrible thing, breaking away from the kingdom, from the southern kingdom. The altar will split and the ashes will spill, and Yeravam tries to stop him, and then his arm freezes. It's a really exciting perek in Malachim. And then then Yeravam says to him, okay, I understand, come and eat with me. And Ido says, no, God told me not to eat with anybody. I'm not allowed to eat today. I have to do what I do and then go straight home. So he goes on the way home, and this other false prophet sees him on the way and says to him, come and eat. And he says, no, I can't eat. That's part of my prophecy. He says, no, I'm also a prophet. God told me you can eat. He makes up a prophecy just so he can give him something to eat. And what happens then? They were sitting at the table, and then suddenly God starts actually speaking to this false Navi and gives him real nevuah. What gave him the merit of real nevuah? He gave someone a cup of tea. That brought it to him, and it wasn't such a great nevuah. He gave a nevuah that Edo was going to die because he'd failed to keep the original nevuah, and of course then he was killed by a lion. Very interesting story, and the lion guards his body until this guy comes back, etc. And if you by accident make a mistake in this mitzvah of Hachnasat Orchim, it's as if you did it on purpose. Da'am Rav Yehuda Amarav ilmale halveu Yonasan leDavid shtei kikros lechem. If Yonasan had just given David a little bit of bread for the way when he left him, lo nerga noiv irakonim, he wouldn't have had to go to Nov to beg for food because he was starving. And of course, remember the story, the Kohanim in Nov gave him food, and when Shaul found out that they'd given him food, he slaughtered the Kohanim in Nov. If only Yonasan had had the foresight to just give him a sandwich, give him something, give him a pita bread, none of this would have happened. Look what happened, and it was an accident. He didn't mean it. He didn't mean to have them killed, and yet all of this played out. And eventually Shaul himself was killed because of this, and his 3 sons were killed. This terrible tragedy, and we'll see another example of this coming up soon, rolled itself out because Yonasan didn't think to give people food. I wonder whether Jewish people have imbibed all these Gemaras and are therefore so, insistent on giving everybody food all the time. But it's really stressing it again and again. Yecheskel, number 11, Chsiv. HaMizbeach Eitz, God is giving Yecheskel a nevuah of the 3rd temple. He says, HaMizbeach Eitz, you make an altar of wood. Shalosh amas kvoa va'arko shteim amos. It'll be 3 high by 2 long. Umiksoisav, and its corners, loy, it'll have the corners on there. Va'arko yikriosav Eitz, and it'll all be made of wood. Va'yidabe Eli, and God says to me, Zeh hashulchan asher lifnei Hashem. Suddenly it flips. It was the Mizbeach a minute ago, and now it's the Shulchan. Now in the temple, the Shulchan was a different piece of equipment. Why are you using that word? So the Gemara says, Patach b'Mizbeach. The verse starts in Yecheskel, calls it the altar. V'siyim b'Shulchan, then he calls it the table. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish Da'amit Ravayu. Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan say, Bizman shebeis HaMikdash kiyam. When the Beis HaMikdash was there, Mizbeach machape al Adam. We had a Mizbeach to atone for our sins. They could bring korbanos. It helped us. Achshav, now what do we have instead of a Mizbeach? Shulchano shal Adam machape alav. It's your dining room table that is the replacement for the Mizbeach. Rashi says, the Hachnasat Orchim, which is absolutely fascinating that we now see the dining room table as the Mizbeach, if you like, of the house. This is where we do our service to God, on the dining room table. And actually many of the minhagim that the Jewish people have created reflect this idea. The idea of dipping bread in the salt, like the Kohanim used to dip the meat as they ran up to the altar. The idea of there is a minhag not to have metal knives on the table. Not on Shabbos, it's not a problem, but during the week, people take the knives off the table before benching. And one of the reasons is, it's like the Mizbeach, you weren't allowed to have any metal object touching the Mizbeach, and this is like the Mizbeach. Even the minhag to throw the challah, which many people think is a Sephardi only minhag, but it's actually not true. The Ksaf Sofer, a Hungarian rabbi, brings down. This is an Ashkenazi minhag as well, because the Kohanim, when they'd run up the ramp and put the meat on the fires, they wouldn't just kind of go close to the fire and put it on. They'd stand from afar and they'd throw the meat onto the flames. And when you throw the challah to the people on the table, you're being a Kohen. This is your service. You are being a Kohen at your dining room table. And the source that I didn't bring you, but which I put in the sheet, I'm not going to read it inside. Rabbeinu Bachia brings a quite remarkable minhag. He brings it in his commentary on Shmot, and also he has a sefer that he calls Sefer Shulchan Shel Arba, a table for four. It's very interesting, and he goes through all the minhagim of Hachnasat Orchim, and he says the Jews of, in one place he says Spain, in one place he says Provence, had a minhag that they would have their dining room tables made into their coffins when they died. So that when they died, they take that with them, because that was the central mizbech of their home. A remarkable, remarkable minhag. I actually went to somebody in, maybe I mentioned this before, in Manhattan. I was invited to his house. I was placed with him as a random guest, and his Hachnasat Orchim was really remarkable. I've been to many places, but he was like unbelievable. And I said to him afterwards, this is incredible, Hachnasat Orchim. And he showed me under the table. He wrote on the middle leaf of his table, I request that my Yorshim use this leaf of the table for the lid of my coffin. And he said, this is what I'm taking with me, my chesed. And he quotes the end of that piece of Rabbeinu Machai. He says, this teaches you that all the money in the world, you can't take it with you. All you can take with you, he quotes the Pasuk in Yeshaya, the halach lefanecha tzidkecha, your tzedek, your chesed, your kindness, that will go before you. I knew a guy in yeshiva who gave money quite generously to a yeshiva. He was a wealthy guy, and then he lost all his money in a crash in Wall Street, whatever. And afterwards he says, you know something, I really don't have much. All that I have left now is the money that I gave to Tzedakah before. That's all that I have, because all the rest is just gone, but no one can ever take that from me. So it's this idea also that your dining room table is this incredible opportunity to use as a mizbech. Okay, I think we've got the idea. Lots and lots of interesting things here. Okay, let's move on actually to some of the specifics, because we're going to skip a few sources here. Let's go to number 15. Let's get into the actual halachot now. Who counts as a guest? Okay, it's such an important mitzvah. Who's a guest? So in Shulchan Aruch, it brings a halacha in Hilchos Shabbos. Some things in Hilchos Shabbos are muksa, you're not allowed to move them. And some things are not muksa, but they're schlepping, and you're not allowed to schlep on Shabbos because it's meant to be a day of rest, and you're not meant to be schlepping, clearing out your machsan. Even if the stuff's not muksa, no, Shabbos is not the day for it. So look at what the Shulchan Aruch says, number 15. Oitze shel tfuah, if you have a storehouse with lots of produce, lots of food, or shel kada yain, or wine barrels, you've got all this food there. Even though you're allowed to take from that food on Shabbos. Why might you have thought not? Because you might have thought, no, this is not for Shabbos, this is for sale, for another time, and you might have thought it's muksa because I wasn't intending to use it on Shabbos. The Shulchan Aruch is saying, no. Food is never muksa. You never know when you're going to need more food. Food is always there for the taking. However, it's your food, obviously. But you can't start schlepping all the boxes and the barrels and start doing it on Shabbos. Unless you need to do so for a mitzvah, kagoin, shepinau, but you have to clean out your room, lahachnasat orchim, or likvoa bo beis hamedrash. Somebody on Shabbos says, we don't have a hall for our Beis Medrash program. Can we use your storehouse? No problem. Then you can get everyone to schlep all of these things because they're not muksa, so you can schlep them. Or for Hachnasat Orchim, suddenly you have 15 more people coming than you thought. You can make the space. Now the Ramah jumps in and says, okay, this is a big heter in Hilchos Shabbos. Who is considered halachically a guest that allows you to rely on this heter? So look at the Ramah, number 15. The loy mikre orchim, second line in the middle. You don't call someone a guest. Ella, he gives some examples. Shenit archu etzlo bebeso, someone who's staying over with you for Shabbos. They don't have anywhere else to eat. Okay, that's a guest. Or shezimen orchim shenidarchu etzelachem, or someone else from out of town is staying with somebody else, but they're eating with you. That's a guest because they don't have anywhere to eat. Aval keshizimen chavera, but when you invite around your friends, lisoid etzla, to eat with you, loy mikra orchim. That's not called guests. Meaning for this heter, I need to know who qualifies as a guest. The ain't a sudas mitzvah. That's not called a sudas mitzvah. Rak sudas rishus. It's fine, it's nice, it's permitted, you didn't do anything wrong. Socializing is great, but socializing is not hachnasat orchim. Unless, of course, the person you're inviting is needy. And needy doesn't just mean financially needy. These cases where you have nowhere else to eat, a person might be emotionally needy, they might be psychologically needy, they might need chizuk. Just because they're wealthy and they have food in the cupboard doesn't mean they don't need company. So whenever a person is, and again, inviting one's friends is fine. Everyone needs a Shabbos off every now and then from Hachnasat Orchim every week. You can have just let your friends relax. That's great. That's mitzvah. That's a reshus. But a person should be focusing always on the people who really need it, whatever the need is in that sense. That's called Hachnasat Orchim. The Chofetz Chaim has an interesting piece in number 17. He says, actually, if you can invite people who are poor, who also are hungry, even better. Look what he says, very interesting reflection. He says, you should also know, he says this in his Sefer Avas Chesed, the mitzvah Hachnasat Orchim noeg af ba'ashirim, you can also do this mitzvah with rich people. They don't have to be destitute. He quotes the Sefer there, b'shem Maharil. Even if these rich people don't need your money, don't need your food, greeting people with a smile, like this is the psychology. Greeting people with a friendly face, to give them honor, to show them a wonderful time. That's great, that's a mitzvah. They don't have to be poor. Even better if the guests are also needy, they're poor or needy in other ways. Mitzvah kafula, that's a double mitzvah. Shemakayim is a gam mitzvah staka. You can also fulfill the mitzvah of staka. For our great sins, he says, Harabim, nafuch have. It's now the opposite way around in Lithuania. When rich people come, etzloi to your house, you give them all of you roll out the red carpet. And when nebach, depressed people come, poor people, again, he's focusing not just on the money, but on people who are nebach. Often, Hachnasat Orchim is inviting the nebachs, and making them feel less like a nebach. Ein sameach boy. The people are not happy about that kolkach. And they do it grudgingly. He says that's not how it should be. A person should be. You can give Hachnasat Orchim for the rich, but you can give it even better for the poor. So I'm going to list for you now a bunch of halachas for the host and for the guests. Okay, and then we'll get into something more hashkafic towards the end of the shir. So, very, very interesting ideas. First of all, I didn't bring you sources for every one of them. There's always an idea of mitzvah boy yosemi b'shluchai. That if you can do a mitzvah yourself, it's better than appointing a shaliach to do it. Avram Avinu is an old man, he's a distinguished person. He runs around. He doesn't just click his fingers and get all the servants to run around. He runs. He stands over them. He waits on them. He does it personally. It's for the balabayas to set an example. They talk about, what's the best way you can educate your kids in Hachnasat Orchim, or any mitzvah for that matter? That they see you doing it, not that you tell them to do it. That they see you doing it, you act as a role model. That's very important. The idea we just saw in the Chofetz Chaim, save panim yafos, to smile at people. Hachnasat Orchim is not just about giving people food. It's about giving people a nice experience, a pleasant experience. I know this from, I've been teaching seminary students for 20 years. They go to the weirdest places sometimes for Shabbos. They come back and they tell me, what was your Shabbos like? Well, we went to this place, we went to that place. They tell me sometimes we went to this very nice family, and the balabais, spoke a lot, but he didn't look at us. He looked at the wall every time he gave us food or whatever. Okay, I get that, I understand that, but they thought that was super weird, and I also think if that's a little bit strange, because if you're going to make a strange atmosphere, just invite guys, invite people, but don't give them a weird kind of vibe. But this is in halakha number 18. You must always greet people with a smile. And by the way, who's the one that said you're never fully dressed without a smile? I'm not thinking about Annie. I'm thinking about Havdil Shammai. Shammai is the one in Pirkei Avos. Shammai, the one who's the strict one. That if you ask a stupid question, throws you out of the base medrash, unlike Hillel, who's the patient one. Shammai is the one that says you have to smile all the time. Kate said, how does that work? If you gave someone all the money in the world, upanav kvushim ba'aretz, and you have a, what did my grandparents used to call it, like a fabisin upon him? Yeah, like a panim kvushim. Okay, panav kvushais, okay, ba'aretz. Male al a pickled face. It doesn't mean a pickled face, but whatever. Male alav akasav ki'ilu lonas naklum. It's as if you gave them nothing. You gave them nothing because you gave them all the money in the world with a grimace. But if you greet people with a big smile, a genuine smile, even if you gave them nothing but the smile, it's if you gave them all the money in the world. People often ask me, what should I be giving to the people at the kotel? People are connecting, with the tins. Some of them, I've been seeing them there for decades collecting. I said, okay, you can give them money if you want. I don't think you should give them big money because you don't know who they are. You don't know if, your big money should go to people who you know where it's going, but you should give them a big smile. And if you give them a big smile and wish to give them a bracha, usually the genuine ones will give you a big smile back and give you a bracha back. You don't have to give them money. You have to give them a bracha and a smile. If you want to give them money, but you don't know who's genuine and who's not. But giving someone a smile is a very crucial part of Hachnasat Orchim, as we saw from the Chafetz Chaim here. Number 19, Shulchan Aruch, not to embarrass guests. Ein mistaklim bifnei ha'oichel. You can't look, don't stare at people who are sitting at your table eating. And this is somewhat societal because, in England, nobody stares at anybody. In fact, in England, nobody even has any eye contact most of the time. They can be talking to you for half an hour and looking at the floor because it's a strange... when I'm interviewing students and I'm trying to work out whether there's anything a little bit off, so if they're English and they don't look me in the face for the whole interview, I think, okay, that's normal. If they're American, that's weird because Americans know how to look you in the eye and talk to you. It says, but you shouldn't stare at them. And don't stare at their food. Because you mustn't upset them. Adam kapdan, and the balabais has to be careful not to be a kapdan. Perish here is ka'asan, to get angry, or ragzan, to get irritated basuda. Keeping calm is very important. One of the things, actually, I'm doing the research now for the Ethiopian Shia, on the Ethiopian community, in some of their classic literature, they have it on Hilchas Shabbos. They don't really have a rabbinic layer. Everything is either permitted or it's chayav misa. And they have a whole list of this is chayav misa and that's chayav misa. One of the things they say is to argue or get angry on Shabbos is chayav mita. It's bring down in the classic sources there. Meaning, and we have an idea that you shouldn't get angry on Shabbos, but they took it all the way. And here you see getting angry. And it's not always easy. You know how this is, especially if you have grumpy teenagers who are playing up and being difficult and just being just generally obnoxious at your Shabbos table, and you just want to throw them out. It's hard. It's hard. But you have to do it with a good smile and try not to get angry with anybody. Other halachas, number 20. Okay, if you have a group of people eating together, Godel Shebakulam Boitseya, 3 friends. The greatest of them, the biggest Talmud Chacham, whatever, should make hamotzi. Ve'im heim shavim, if they're all the same, ve'echad mehem Kohen, all of them's a Kohen. Mitzvah lahakdima, so you give it to the Kohen. You should always try and give the first thing to the Kohen. When my son's teacher would give out the homework, the test that he marked, he would always give first to the Kohanim when he gave them, the test. I'm not sure they wanted to be first on that one, okay, but he would always. The ima Kohen am haaretz, if the Kohen is not learned, Talmud Chacham kaidim lo, we give to the Talmud Chacham. But but if the balabait is there, if it's Hachnasat Orchim, not just 3 friends eating, but there's someone who's the balabait, who might say he or she has to make hamotzi. Even if they have very distinguished guests, why does the balabait have to be the one who makes hamotzi? Because they can decide how to be generous with the bread. Someone else, you ask a guest to make hamotzi, they're nervous to cut big wedges of challah and give them. Maybe you're trying to keep some leftovers for the next meal. If you're the balabais, you can be as generous as you want, and therefore the idea of making hamotzi is part of the privilege of the balabayas, the baalatabayas, whoever it is that is in charge of the house. There's some halachas on the hosts to make people feel comfortable, etc., etc. What about the guests? Even more halachas on the guests. Have a look on page 5, number 27. Like I said to you, vayome elav, so vayomru elav. Oh, hang on, I skipped a page. Sorry. You're quite right. I've got them clips in the wrong one. Number 21. Sorry, I skipped a page. Number 21. The Mishnah brings down, though, if everyone has their own hamotzi, if they have their own hamotzi, like Hasidim have a custom, everyone makes their own hamotzi. Okay, fine, let them make their own hamotzi if everyone has their own chalas. Other things. Chesed is focused on the needs of the guest and not the needs of the host. Obviously, it's v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. It's doing for other people. Chinuch, very important. Don't forget Avram, although he runs around doing a lot for the guests, he tells the nar, I want you involved as well. He gets Yishmael involved to train him, to give him a job to do as well. Building a positive energy. Think of the speed, think of the energetic house that Avram is sitting there in the heat of the day, having just had a significant operation. And when guests come, they snap into energy mode. Everyone's running around. Number 22, I brought you a very interesting midrash. It says, Ma ra liyos poches kol yom. Why do the korbanos of Sukkot go down every day? All these lots and lots of korbanos at the beginning, down to one korban right at the end. Limdcha Torah derech eretz min korbanos. The Torah is teaching you derech eretz, how to do Hachnasat Orchim. It's teaching you from the korbanos. Sheim yelech lachsani. If you go to a place and they greet you, v'kiblu chavero yom rishon makabel yafa. The first day when you first arrive, you know what it's like. You haven't seen someone for a long time. How do they treat you when you arrive? Red carpet treatment. Oh, amazing. Umachila oifas. You give them birds. I think birds here doesn't mean chicken. I think it means, something very fancy. I don't know, pheasants or grouse or who knows what they made. Based on the second day, machilo basar. Oh, second day we go down a little notch. We'll give you a piece of beef. But shlishi machilo dagim. On the third day we give you a bit of fish. B'revi machilo yerik. The fourth day you have a salad. So too, you go down every day. Shemachila. So at the end of the stay, machilo kitnias. Kitnias are always the things which are like nobody wants kitnias. You have to have some hummus. What does this mean? That when you do Hachnasat Orchim, if every day is the same kind of red carpet formal treatment, that's great for the first day. But after a while, it becomes uncomfortable. Like, I've been here a week already and you're still receiving me like I'm the King of England. Like, after a while you say to the guests, okay, you've been here a while, here's the milking side, here's the fleshig side, make yourself a cup of tea, make yourself an omelette, feel at home. That's what it's saying, feel at home. You have to make people feel at home. This is part of it as well. Number 23, I might have to skip a few because there's a lot here. Let's read this. Number 23, Kitayv loy imach. He talks about the Eved Ivri, and you have to make it good for them. Imach b'machal, imach b'mishteh. They have to eat what you eat and drink what you drink. Shaloi tehei ata oichel pas nekia. You can't be you eating high quality bread. V'hu oichel pas kiba, and they eat nebach, brown bread or bad bread. Ata shote yain yashan, you drink good wine. V'hu shote yain chadash, and you give them grape juice. Ata yoshin al gabi muchin, you sleep on beautiful beds. V'hu yashan al gabi atevan, and they sleep on the hay. Meaning, whatever you do for the Eved Ivri has to be at least as good as what you do for you. Hence the phrase at the end that if you get yourself an Eved Ivri, it's as if you got yourself a master, not got yourself a servant. That's an Eved. All the more so a guest who has to be, you have to give them what they want, and the quality food that you get has to be how you do the mitzvah as well. And the Rambam in 24 brings from Cain and Hevel. And you see from the story of Cain and Hevel is when you offer up something as a mitzvah, you have to give it your best, not something substandard grudgingly, like Cain gives what he gives. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. And here the Rambam says, with every mitzvah you do, when you build a shul, you build a beautiful shul. When you serve food to guests, you serve them the best way you can, etc., etc. Let's talk about livui. Why is this focus on escorting them out? And it brings in number 25 from the story of the Egla Arufa. Remember the Egla Arufa that there's a dead body that is found, and nobody knows how this person died. They died on the road in the countryside, and they have to measure to the nearest town, and the rabbis of the town have to come out and say, Yedeinu lo shafchu es adam hazeh, we didn't spill this blood, meaning they have to ask themselves, are we responsible? Did we do something wrong here? And the Gemara says, in the second line, did it occur to you that they would have been murderers? It can't mean that. He didn't come to us and we sent him away hungry. He didn't come to see us. What they call levaya. We didn't send them out without an escort. Meaning maybe we didn't give them proper instructions. They went the wrong way. They fell down a cliff. They were attacked by listim, etc., by robbers. They have to ask themselves, did we give this person the right treatment and give them the escort out of the premises, or did we inadvertently contribute to murdering them? And therefore in number 26, the Rambam says, therefore we take this very seriously. The Beis Din would appoint people to enforce that hosts would show their guests out properly. The Beis Din would actually employ people to make sure people weren't wandering around. Now, you might think this sounds a bit strange, but where I live, down in Gush Etzion, it's all very beautiful, but you take a couple of wrong turnings, and you're in El Arub, and the natives are not very friendly there. You have to make sure, how people know where they're going, where is good to go, where is safe to go, where is not safe to go, etc. The Beis Din would appoint people. Says the Rambam, if the community is lazy about this, it's as if they've murdered the person. And even if all you do is just go arba amos, to give them covered, that itself is fine. But then he goes, if it's more than covered, there's more to go. How far do you have to walk with them? If it's the Rav escorting the Talmud, you even have to give your Talmidim kavod. Ad ubrasheli, you have to walk them to the edge of the town. Ha'ish lechavero, a regular person for their friend, ad tchum Shabbos, even further than the edge of the town. Hatalmid, the Rav, ad parsa, the Talmud has to go to the Rav far out of the town. Ve'im haya rabba mufak, and if it's the main rabbi, even shalosh parsis, even a few miles. Again, today we have roads, we have street lights. You don't have to go walking 7 miles to take someone from your home, but you have to make sure they know where they're going, that they've got everything they need, etc., etc. Therefore, these are important halachas, even ad hayom hazeh. I once heard of a guy who completely messed this up. He drew a line in chalk, 4 amos outside his front door, and said, okay, this is what I'm going to do my mitzvah. And he kind of went up to this line and he stood there and he kind of waved. Okay, and that's called missing the point. The point is that they're meant to feel that you're doing it in order to give them cover, not in order to fulfill a mitzvah. That is the reason, by the way, one of the reasons why we don't make a bracha on mitzvahs bein adam l'chaveru. A poor person comes to the door collecting tzedakah. Open the door. Yes, I'd like to give tzedakah. Oh, amazing! Stand there. Baruch atah. You're not going to do that. Why? Because you just made him your mitzvah object. I've just shaken you like my lulav. You never make a bracha on a mitzvah bein adam l'chaveru because that takes away from the sense that you're doing it really for them. It's not just some kind of slightly OCD, mitzvah experience. Okay, let's talk briefly about the guests. The Malachim, page 5, asked, where is your wife? So Rashi, famously, number 28, they knew full well where she was. They didn't even need her. They didn't come to talk to her. They wanted to tell Avram, your wife is so amazing, so that he'd love her even more. That's a very important idea. And by the way, the Gemara brings that there are dots on the ayeh. Dots on the aleph, the yud, and the vav, which spells ayo. So the Gemara says they asked him where she was, and they asked her where he was. Meaning that's the point. You as a guest are there to bring shalom bayis to the home. Because if you think about it, you're intruding on their family dynamic. You could actually disrupt their shalom bayis. The job of the guest is to be there to oil the wheels, how lovely the children are and how well behaved they are, and how, obviously it has to make sense. If they're screaming and throwing things around the room, then that's not going to be taken seriously. But you have to find a way to bring shalom bayis into the home. Number 29, as a host, I like this one. The Gemara here gives a list of things which are not good form. Taking Tilish Yadayim seriously is bad. Megunim imenu, even worse than that, is ochel melifnei oreach, eating in front of your guests. But megunim imenu, even worse than that, is oreach machnis oreach. When guests bring other uninvited guests, that's a no-go for a guest. And by the way, you get this kind of little game. Can I come for Shabbos? Yes, no problem. And can I bring 5 of my friends as well? No, you can't. So you have to say that the first breath, not the next breath. Okay, then v'ha'oreach matriach balabayit meguna mishloshtan. But the most meguna, the most unacceptable of all of them, is a nudnik guest. A guest that drives your balabayis crazy. Nudnikim. No nudnikim, please, as guests. In fact, the job of the host, the guest rather, number 30, is hanichnas labayis kol ma sheyoma lo balabayis yaseh. The job of the host, the guest rather, is to do whatever the host says they need to be done. And the Mishnah Berurah says, not obviously if they ask you to do something inappropriate, but if they need help, then you should be helping them. You should be proactively helping them. And if you're shy, the Mishnah Berurah gives this example, and you don't like speaking at the table, then you should not be shy, because you need to create the atmosphere. It's very interesting. The Mishnah Berurah says the guest has to be prepared to contribute. Sometimes they don't realize, especially the seminary girls, whatever, they think they're going to a show. Oh, it's really amazing. Go to this house for, I'm looking around the room, some of you have been entertaining for decades. And they come there like as if they're the front row seats at the show. Like what's going to be? And the answer is, you're the show. You're the guest. You make the show. If you don't do it right, then it doesn't happen. These are all in the halacha. Number 32, fascinating. The Rambam says one of the things that it's very hard to do tshuva for is when you eat a meal at a host when they can't really afford to give it to you. You look around the house, you look at what the food is, and you realize these people don't have any money. They're relying on this food, this Shabbos food, to be their leftovers to eat the whole week. You're not allowed to ask for seconds. You have to, I'm not hungry, I'm just feeling a little bit like, I'm not eating too much today. You have to have the seichel to look around the house and say, even though they want to be generous, they can't afford it. And he said, and people say, well, I didn't steal the food. That's not the point. You didn't think, and you should have thought harder. Number 33, that the mitzvah on the guest is to be the person who benches. The guest has to bench because the guest has to be the one who actually gives a bracha to the balabayit, and it's actually very important that as a guest you give the yiratzon, the bracha to the balabayit, that they should have parnasa and they should have a good commute back there and back to work, which that bracha says, which is actually very, very important. Every now and then, as a guest, you end up in a home which is very strange. Maybe we'll finish with this, because I don't have time to talk about Avram and the mitzvahs. We'll do that another time. But let's just finish with 34 and 35. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Orchim hanichnasim etzel balabayit, einam rishayim little milifnehem. You as a guest can't decide who gets what food. The liten lebenoi, give food to the son, or la'avdo, to the servant, shall balabayis, ele imkein not l'rishus mi balabayis. You have to respect boundaries. You can't start playing that you're the host when you're really the guest. And the Mishnah Berurah gives a remarkable story. This was a takana because of something that once happened, he says in 35. He quotes the Gemara in Chulid. There was someone who invited 3 guests. And it was a really famine time. There was very little food. All he could give them was 3 eggs. 1, 2, 3. Put an egg in front of them. And the kid of the house came to eat, and he had nothing. So one of the guests gave him his egg. You eat the egg, son. You need it. And the second one gave him the egg, and the third one gave him the egg. They're all trying to be nice, but they've got no business deciding who gets what. It's not their house. So the father of the child came, and the kid's got 1 egg in his mouth and 2 eggs in his hand. He's just stolen the eggs from his guests, he thinks. He smacks him on the floor, the head, and he falls on the floor. Amazing, he kills the kid, Nebuch. The kiven shirasa imoy, when the mother comes in and sees this has happened, she screams, she goes crazy, she runs to the roof, and she runs, she falls off the roof. Okay? And then when he sees what's happened to his wife, he runs to the roof, and he kills himself as well. Now you're going to say, oh, come on, this is crazy. Have you never been to families that are crazy? There are some families that are mamash meshuga. And the guest has to realize that. He has to understand the boundaries, that this is obviously very extreme, but a person as a guest has to know where those boundaries are. So there are lots of things that we've talked about here. I'll just mention in the last line that Avram and the mitzvot, really, the point of Avram is he had to work it out for himself. All of these ideas, we have the benefit of a shir, of a source sheet, of Gemaras, of Shulchan Aruchs. Avram created a Judaism that he worked out for himself, and therefore we also not just have to be Moshe Jews, where we do everything because we've been told what to do, but we do it because we've worked it through and it makes sense, and we've been able to actually come to that understanding ourselves. Okay, please God, I'll see you next week. Have a wonderful week, and we'll move on next week to other subjects.